There's no denying it. George Washington was an amazing leader. He led the American colonies to victory in the Revolutionary War, and then, as the first president of the United States, he set the standard for the office and for the nation. In this episode, we are going to look at what I believe are George Washington's 7 leadership codes that made him great and that can make us better leaders today. Washington once said, "It is the duty of every man to render personal service to the public measures which he thinks right, as well as to refrain from those which he thinks wrong." In other words, serve your country, not because you want the glory or the power, but simply because it is right. During the long and brutal winter at Valley Forge, while his troops suffered, he shared their hardship. He said, "Reputation is the cornerstone of everything." In other words, your character is your most valuable legacy. And that's why in everything he did, he sought to act with honesty and principle. He said that such divisions would tend to throw the minds of the people into channels of reflection and to excite opposite and hostile feelings. He wrote it for a posterity, for the generations to come. He didn't just think of today, but also the days to come. He wanted his words to guide the nation in the years ahead, and that's why he warned against political parties and geographical divisions. Because he was thinking of the future of the nation, not just his own time. He wanted to build something that would last. He knew that his actions today would affect the generations to come, and that's why he gave up power after 2 terms and why he worked so hard to establish a strong union. He wanted liberty to last. And how right he was? In other words, a divided nation cannot survive. If Americans could only act as one people instead of separate camps, how much more could we accomplish? How much more could we build? How much more could we achieve if we focused on our unity rather than our divisions? He wanted every decision to be guided by his sense of right and wrong, and he wanted to be known for his integrity. Do you remember the story of George Washington and the cherry tree? I do, and build for posterity. What do you think? Did I miss one? Duty before self. Restraint is strength, led by example. Honor and integrity, above all. Loyalty to the Constitution, not personal power. Unity is strength. You know, there's many more stories and lessons to learn from George Washington. As a kid, my father told me that story about how young George shot down a cherry tree and then could and lied to his father about it. And I believed it then. And now, as an adult, I still believe it because it captures the essence of who George Washington was. On the battlefield, he led from the front, showing courage and daring. He respected the separation of power. He deferred to Congress when necessary. Washington was once asked what was the most important quality in a ruler. He answered without hesitation, "He must be a man of some sort of rank." In other words, no man is above the republic. The Constitution is not the servant of any man, but the master of all. And Washington lived that belief. He upheld the rule of law, and he never allowed his personal feelings to override his duty to the Constitution. And in government, he worked tirelessly for the good of the nation, setting the standard for all presidents who came after him. His example was the best advertisement for the new nation. He told the French ambassador that America's best proof of character resides in its acts. And what acts by Washington and the founding generation can better prove the character of the new nation than the example they set for the world? Washington believed that leadership was a sacred obligation, a calling, not a path to power or glory. And he answered that call even when it cost him his comfort and his peace. When he took command of the Continental Army, he gave up power twice. He left his beloved Mount Vernon and all of the comforts of home to live in a tent and to eat and sleep with his troops, often without food or without sleep. It's no wonder that George Washington is regarded as one of the greatest leaders in history. Number 1, duty before self. Number 2, restraint is strength. There's a quote that I love from former President Truman that reads, "The man who doesn't have the courage to say no is not fit to be in the company of men." In other words, true power lies in knowing when not to use it, when to hold back, and when to say no. And George Washington exhibited this restraint time and time again. Washington was obsessed with reputation and moral conduct. Washington believed that actions speak louder than words, and he certainly lived that belief. At the end of his life, George Washington wrote his farewell address, knowing that he might never see it. After the war, he might have assumed the role of king, but instead, he helped write a constitution that made America a republic with no king. And after serving 2 terms as president, he might have run for a 3rd term, but instead, he gave that power to another, setting term limits for himself before they were in fashion, and in doing so, he became more powerful than any king. By refusing to cling to power, Washington showed that he was more interested in the health of the nation than in his own personal gain. That's what it means to be a truly great leader. Number 3, lead by example. Number 4, honor and integrity above all. Number 5, loyalty to the Constitution, not personal power. Number 6, unity over division. In his farewell address, Washington warned the nation against political factions and partisanship. And number 7, build for posterity. Those are the 7 leadership codes of George Washington.